Joining us now to break down the latest moves in the administration and what they could mean for these pending investigations is Jason Miller, a member of the 2016 campaign and transition team and current host of the War Room podcast. So, Jason, the latest developments is regarding Richard Grenell declassifying some of these documents. I think the big one that a lot of people are talking about is the transcript of the phone call between Michael Flynn and then the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak. What would this mean for the investigation?
Well, I think it's more of getting transparency out there, making sure that people realize there was nothing worth going and having this big, massive Russia investigation in the first place. And we talk about it's funny when you say Adam Schiff didn't understand what the big deal was with Obamagate. Obamagate. Well, when you start realizing that these FBI agents were writing down, do we get them? Do we not get them? When you see how far up the chain this went, I think Chanel Ryan with the OAN team has done a great job asking some of these questions in the White House briefing room. The fact of the matter is, Vice President Biden knew about this. He was on the list of the people who unmasked him. It looks like President Obama knew about this. All these folks, Brennan, Clapper, all of them, they all lied about it. Samantha Power, Susan Rice. Why were they unmasking General Flynn? This is a massive, massive scandal.
And I think Chanel is actually one of the only people asking about this subject in the briefing room altogether. And I think that there's questions about this as well, because in my opinion, unless that transcript says, for example, Michael Flynn saying there was collusion taking place during the election, I really don't think the transcript matters that much. I mean, the phone call was made during the transition period, meaning it came after the election. The results were already in. I think that maybe this is maybe something just to kind of put out in the headlines a little bit, acknowledging the fact that both Adam Schiff have called for it and now Rick Grenell is following through on it. You usually don't see that cooperation if it's something that's a little bit more partisan. But now we have John Ratcliffe and his D&I. Do you suspect that he'll be following in the footsteps of Grenell when it comes to this issue?
I think he'll be following somewhat in the footsteps. I mean, John Ratcliffe is not quite the bomb thrower that Rick Grenell is, but I do think he's going to try to get this agency or this overarching encompassing agency a little more streamlined. And that's part of the problem with DNI in the first place. Is there's so many intel agencies, they're sprawling all over the place, trying to get those tightened up and condensed. Look, when President Trump, even though he's the incumbent running for re-election, he still is very much the outsider here. I mean, we have the administrative state, the deep state folks all working against him. The people who say, you know what, Donald Trump, you might be here a year, maybe you're here another 5 years. I'm going to be here another 20 or another 30 years. That's what he's up against every single day.
And I think John Ratcliffe, too, is someone who's going to follow through on the idea of selective leaks. I remember during the impeachment saga, that's really when he first came to the forefront for a lot of people's minds. And he was very troubled by some of the selective leaks that was coming out, not only about the Robert Mueller investigation, but the Ukraine investigation as well. So I think when it does come to this issue, we should at least get a little bit more transparency when it comes to some of this information. But this also comes at a time where the U.S. is looking to hold China accountable for what it did regarding the coronavirus outbreak. And, of course, intelligence is going to be more important than ever when trying to make that case. Do you think John Ratcliffe is the right man for that job?
Absolutely. And this is one of the things where we saw some of the election interference back in 2016. There's election interference already for 2020, but it's right in our face. I mean, we're already seeing Huawei go up with Twitter advertising, trying to sow dissension between African Americans and Hispanic Americans with Donald Trump. We're already seeing China literally in the streets of D.C. You can get a copy of the China People's Daily just at mailbox or post office boxes there, newspaper boxes. It's out in front. It's an insert in the Washington Post. There's not even effort to be low pro about it. They're right in your face saying, yes, we are trying to meddle in your election.
And we've already seen just about 2 weeks ago information suggesting that China was trying to hack our information systems, trying to get information about our vaccines, about our coronavirus response. And even though that's more of the headlines right now, to your point, China's been doing stuff like this longer than we've been covering it for. They've just kind of been getting away with it for the most part. And I think now the American people are starting to have enough. But before we let you go, too, you mentioned Rick Grenell was a little bit more of a bomb thrower. He was good for this position for a lot of Trump allies because he did do a lot of things that maybe other people would not. But now he's saying that he's not going to go back to Germany. What do you think comes next for Richard Grenell?
Yeah, and I think Rick Grenell has been fantastic in his role, and he's fearless. And that's what we need. People aren't worried about the next job. They just want to go, kick some tail, do a good job for President Trump, the American people, and then head off to do their next thing. I think most likely for Rick is he probably ends up in a senior role at the campaign. I think that's probably it. I think a dark horse role could be If Secretary Pompeo decides at the last minute to run for U.S. Senate in Kansas, I think Rick Grenell would be a good choice to step in there, Secretary of State. That's a possibility, but you're definitely going to see a lot more Rick Grenell this year. That I guarantee you.
Yeah, he's definitely earned his stripes among many Trump supporters, including the president himself. We showed the clip of him over the weekend, really praising everything that he's done so far and saying that what makes him different from the people before him is that he had the bravery to follow through on some of the things that he actually said that he was going to do. That's not something we see a lot from lawmakers nowadays.
And you know, one thing, Alex, real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think another thing that could be really interesting for Rick Grenell. Imagine with the job that he did with DNI. Imagine if we sent him to go and streamline HHS or CDC or some of this medical administrative state bureaucracy of the folks who've been there 20, 30, 40 years and haven't done a good job of really streamlining a lot of our healthcare systems. Imagine if we turned Rick Grenell loose over there. He would get that place whipped into shape in no time.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because he's going to have a role. I think a lot of this will come down to what he wants to do. He's kind of earned the reputation he has among the president, and we know that the president is the one largely making the calls when it comes to shaping his administration. So I think that's a good point, too, to keep an eye on. Jason Miller, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.